Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you would rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Posey, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Madam Supervisor. Trustee Bussino?
Here.
Trustee Krasinski?
Here.
Trustee Nevers?
Present.
Trustee Smith?
Here.
Treasurer Goodhue?
Here.
Clerk Pelosi here, and Supervisor Dunn.
Here. Thank you. Next, we have the approval of the agenda, and there are several changes. Ms. Posey.
We have a proposed add-on, agenda item D1, which is request authorization for a building inspector to attend conference. Proposed add-on, agenda item 11A, request to authorize supervisor to execute authorization to release confidential data on behalf of the township. Proposed add-on, agenda item 11B, request to extend offer of employment to building inspector. Proposed add-on, agenda item 15, request to authorize supervisor to execute purchase agreement with 6 Rivers Land Conservancy. Request to remove to closed session, proposed add-on, agenda item 14, request to authorize general counsel to execute Hummel Acres consent judgment per MCL 15.268 subsection E. And also move to closed session, request to move to closed session item 13 per MCL 15.26A subsection A. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else have any additions to the agenda?
Seeing none, I make a motion to approve as presented.
Motion by Ms. Posey,
Support.
supported by Mr. Bussino to approve the amended agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. Motion carries. Next is the approval of the bills. As usual, there are 2 bill runs. If you wish an item removed, please indicate so at this time.
Madam Chair, if there are no issues with either bill run, I move that we approve both.
Motion by Ms. Nevers,
Support.
seconded by Ms. Goodhue to authorize payment of both bill runs. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. Motion carries. Next, we have the approval of the previous meeting minutes from April the 24th. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to the minutes?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the previous minutes from April the 24th, 2019, as presented.
Motion by Ms. Goodhue.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Posey to approve the minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. That motion carries. We also have the approval of the closed session minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the closed session meeting minutes from April the 24th.
Support.
Motion by Ms. Goodhue, seconded by Mr. Krasinski to approve the closed session meeting minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. That motion carries. Next, we have the consent agenda. These are items that come before the board on a regular basis. If anyone wishes to discuss an item on the consent, please indicate so at this time.
It's for pain.
Madam Chair, seeing no objections, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Motion by Ms. Posey,
Support.
supported by Ms. Goodhue, to approve the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. That motion carries. Next, we have public comments, and this is comments on agenda items only. If you wish to speak on an agenda item, please come to the podium, state your name. Remember, there's a 3-minute time limit.
Jim Jellius, address on file. Item 13, which is now in closed session. Regarding this item, I hope the board will do an honest evaluation of legal counsel and the dual employment position, which clearly appears to not be working based on recent employee resignations, all for apparently the same reasons. Between the resignations, the past comments made about starting World War III to the fire union president, and publicly hostile behavior displayed by some of you towards certain board members during board meetings all clearly show there's a real problem. In my opinion, it does appear that Mr. Assorti is part of this hostile work environment based on Mr. Maher and Ms. Karn's statements last meeting. I found their statements to be honest and sincere. Since Mr. Assorti reports to the supervisor, I find it hard to believe that the supervisor has not been aware of this problem. The public has observed at several past board meetings hostile behavior from legal counsel and other board members towards Clerk Posey and Trustee Boozenow, and even residents that speak up from the podium. So it's certainly not hard to believe that this behavior probably goes on within Town Hall, perhaps daily. This problem must be addressed now. Our valued employees and all elected officials deserve much better. They deserve to operate in a hostile-free environment, free from threats, harassment, and lack of respect. I hope that all of you have the courage to address this issue honestly and correct this problem without any undue delay before we lose more good people. Item 12. As chairman of the Ethics Advisory Committee, I am, of course, in support of this item. Our committee worked very hard to try to come up with an easy-to-read ethics ordinance in the hope that it would help deter some behaviors that have occurred in the past and evidently are occurring still. Given the recent circumstances, such as employee resignations, there can be no doubt that an ethics ordinance is needed. Who knows, had one been in effect now, giving the employee a platform to address some of the aforementioned allegations, perhaps some of these resignations could have been avoided. This is an item whose time has come. Thank you.
I'm Megan Young. I'm the elections coordinator here at Macomb Township, and I'm standing in front of you, my supervisor and board members today for two reasons. First, for the opportunity to address the board prior to any decision being made on behalf of me this evening. I believe I'm agenda number 15 under closed session. Sorry. And second, to address circumstances that I believe have been unfair during my employment investigation. On February 23rd, 2019, a meeting was called Mr. Sorty, Supervisor Dunn, and Clerk Posey to discuss an allegation of falsifying my employment application. It was alleged that I was terminated from a previous employer and had not disclosed that information to the township. Mr. Sorty opened an investigation after receiving a subpoena from Macomb Township of my employee file, in which case he presented the complaint alleging discrimination and unlawful termination against my former employer. I was not notified of this meeting, nor was it disclosed that this issue could result in disciplinary action. Because of this, I did not request union representation or outside counsel. Then on March 18, 2019, I was notified of an investigative meeting to be held later that day. The meeting was held so that Ms. Kathleen Gotti, an attorney, an outside attorney selected by Mr. Sorty, could interrogate me regarding my lawsuit for wrongful termination. During this meeting, she refused to move forward with questioning unless I gave up my right to either union representation or an attorney. Since then, Ms. Gotti and Mr. Sorty have also both called the attorney for my prior case to retain additional information, in which that attorney refused because it is under stipulated protective order. Additionally, Mr. Sorty has provided false and misleading information in an email he sent to the clerk and supervisor after having a conversation with my attorney. He stated that my attorney had actually told him that I was terminated, when in fact she advised Mr. Sorty that my previous employer ruled that I had voluntarily quit, and also provided him with documentation regarding his request. The point of the investigation is to review information I provided on my application. An application is to allow a potential employer to learn about a potential employee and give them a chance to investigate their background and determine if they would like to extend an offer of employment. My former lawsuit was pending in the Federal Eastern District of Michigan when I applied to Macomb Township, and it's public record. There's nothing secret about it. Mr. Sorty advised me that this would be a closed matter if I was able to provide a resignation letter. I provided a resignation letter on April 30th, 2019, and requested confirmation that this would no longer be an issue. Instead, I received a response from my union that Mr. Sorty is not requesting further information, and as it stands, my investigation is still pending. I come into work every day wondering if I'll be terminated and why, and I go home thinking about what would happen if I lose my job and how I would be able to contribute to my family further. During the day, I spend time with my coworkers. I worry about not being able to find another job that I enjoy so much. I work for very kind, caring, and intelligent individuals. From day one, Clerk Posey, her staff, and many employees here have made me felt at home. And although the last several weeks have been extremely stressful, there's no place or organization that I'd rather work for. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Western. I'd like to speak to items number 12 and 13, the ethics ordinance and the performance review of HR Director, Legal Counsel Thomas Sorty. Regarding the ethics ordinance at the April meeting held here, the Township Supervisor and the HR Director, Legal Counsel, both said they had not read the current draft of the ethics ordinance being discussed that night. However, Thomas Sorty did say he could go up to his office right then and there and write a workable ethics ordinance in 2 or 3 hours. So if you have not already told him to do that, maybe you could tell him to do that tonight, so you'd have it in your hands more quickly and ready for review at the next meeting. It would be nice to have this done and to move on. Regarding item number 13, the performance review of Thomas Sorty. This contract has been in effect for nearly 2.5 years. The contract itself contains a requirement for an annual review, but you, the board, avoided doing it. Or maybe you were waiting for the HR director to call it to your attention. The residents would like to know the criteria that you will be using to evaluate his performance and how that compares to the criteria used for the evaluations of other employees in the township. What is it that you are requiring of him? There have been claims by some of the board members that Thomas Sorty is being attacked. At least one of you seems inspired to defend him, both in your remarks here at these meetings from the dais and to newspaper reporters. Some of us do not understand why you not only avoid evaluating his performance, but you go to great lengths to protect him, while he is the highest paid employee of the township, with a just cause contract, the authority to farm out as much of the legal work as he wants to whomever he wants, and enjoys great benefits, all wrapped up in a contract with no end date. Well, I was going to say we would look forward to your discussion tonight, but since this has been moved to closed session, I guess we won't be party to the discussion. Thank you.
Good evening, Tom Sokol. My address is on record with the clerk's office. I just wanted to take the time to recognize the employee from the clerk's office, I believe, the elections coordinator. That's not easy to do. That took a lot of courage, and I think a lot of us were touched by those comments. So kudos for her for having the courage to say what she said. I also wanted to address items number 12 and 13. The first one, number 12, regarding the ethics ordinance. I just wanted to remind a lot of the residents, as well as the board who maybe weren't engaged when this was formulated, one of the decisions that were made around the ethics ordinance was that each member for the committee that was going to be formed was going to be nominated from each member of the board. So this committee is a very diverse committee because every single board member, which we know to be very diverse sometimes in terms of their politics or their votes, got to pick their candidate to be on the committee. The reason why that's important is it's important to note that every single member on this committee has found a way to work together, has found a way to be cordial and professional throughout this whole process of coming up with a draft. And that's important to note because the entire committee is unanimous when it comes to there being a need to have an ordinance in place. So as discussions move forward with the board, I just want to remind them that this is a diverse group and that they are all on the same page and aligned when it comes to the importance of having this and implementing it. Regarding item number 13 and the HR director legal counsel contract, I just wanted to highlight a few points. I spoke here before to Mrs. Dunn regarding healing, moving forward, restoring faith, building credibility. And when you think of the optics around the process, we had opportunities, not one but two, at this point to have this review. Many of you may not recall, but 2.5 years ago when we had this contract, we had an Open Meetings Act violation. We had probably the most heated board meetings in the short history I've been watching very closely. It was a very intense meeting when it came to the approval of this contract. And I'd like to think that we take that seriously, that feedback from the residents seriously, that we'd have reviews, that we'd have goals and objectives for Mr. Assorti, 3 to 5 goals and objectives. It's an industry standard for professional decisions. We don't have things like that in place, and we want to know why. So we'd like to see a serious discussion around this moving forward and execution per the contract. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Denise Aquino, and I had not intended to speak this evening. However, I came here, I haven't been here in about 6 years, but I have a lot of great concerns about what's happening in our township. I've lived here for 40 years, and throughout that 40 years, I feel that we never really seemed to have a plan of how we were going to add amenities, how we were going to handle human resources, how we were going to handle what it is the citizens really want from our community. After reading the letter from the employee and having experience as a board member at a school district level, my observation this evening is I cannot believe that the community is coming to the podium and not one of you has asked a question or said, I think we need to get back with you on that. Not one of you. Like, I can't even believe this is happening. People are voting for you. These people voted for you or didn't, but you still owe them your attention and how you conduct yourselves. In terms of item 12, in terms of constantly changing the date, postponing the date, voting on the date, what is so difficult about this? You appointed people to do this for you. Community members took time out of their lives, times out of their day, and they did this assuming that you were empowering them to do that. And now you just keep postponing it, not commenting on it. If there was ever a township or any organization in need of ethics, you guys are the picture of it. Let me tell you that. So that item, Mr. Assorti, I don't know you. I have nothing against you. But I do feel that his role as both a legal counsel and as an HR person, did we always have our attorney, I don't remember, sitting at the table with the board members as an advisory? You did. Okay, so that's fine. I mean, I don't see the need for that I don't see the need for a full-time legal counsel when you could hire anybody on the outside to take care of different cases based on their expertise in those areas. However, I do think that when he is sitting there as the attorney, but when employees like the person from the clerk's office came up here, he's sitting, could be, I'm not saying you are, could be sitting here in judgment of those people and has the power to either hire or fire them. That is a conflict of interest. So all I'm here to say is I didn't intend to speak this evening, but after what I read in the paper after I know what's going on with corruption in the past. I think we need an ethics committee, and I don't think the dual role for Mr. Assorti, no offense to you, it is a conflict of interest in my opinion and should be changed. And I would assume, no offense, Ms. Dunn, but who do you report to? I mean, I know you don't report to anybody, but you do report to us. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is Joseph O'Connor. I'm a labor relations specialist for the Michigan Association of Public Employees. I'm the labor representative for the Macomb Township Public Employees Association. I'm here in regards to item number 13 on tonight's agenda. 2 years ago, on May 24th, I appeared here and I spoke on behalf of the membership regarding the board's decision on combining the Human Resources Director's position and Township Legal Services. At that time, I expressed the concerns of the union members to the board, and that the union opposed the combining of the two positions. Based on our experience during this time frame, the last 2 years, the union has not changed their stance on this, and our view remains the same, that the two positions should be separate. They should not be combined and handled by one individual. We ask the board reconsider their position on this, and they reevaluate the current status and job performance of Mr. Assorti. Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Dennis Martin. I'm here tonight on behalf of ASME Local 1917, who represents the Township Management Union. I would like to address Agenda Item 13. Our union is in possession of a letter written by Tom Assorti to the Board of Trustees in response to the resignation letter provided by Patrick Maher. In this letter, Mr. Assorti refutes Mr. Maher's claims and then goes on to praise his own performance negotiating union contracts. On that subject, the union could not disagree more. During negotiations, we have found Mr. Assorti to be unprepared and combative. Mr. Assorti refused to allow the township negotiating team to sign the tentatively agreed upon contract. This is common practice that was not followed, and as a result, it delayed and confused the process further. We in fact voted on this contract 3 times. Twice our membership was put in a position to vote on a contract without a written copy presented and prepared for them by Mr. Assorti to review. On the 3rd vote, we did receive a copy that contained many errors. Our past 4 contracts were negotiated with a full-time HR director. Those contracts were completed in 5 or less meetings within a 2-month period. This was our first contract negotiated since combining of the 2 positions. We met a total of 22 times from August 30th until April 24th. That is 6 days shy of 8 months. In 2016, we approached this board and urged you not to combine the HR director position with the legal counsel position. We didn't believe the combination would be beneficial then, and now after 2 years, we still feel the same way. Mr. Assorti's letter to the board states he believes that he has dispelled the idea of other department heads and a majority of employees are dissatisfied with his performance. This could not be further from the truth. Department heads often need legal reviews of items they need to address in order to run their departments more efficiently. When Mr. Assorti misses the deadline and you question him on the progress of the item, he becomes indignant and looks to pass the blame on to someone else rather than address the matter. At the State of the Township address, Supervisor Dunn stated department heads and management team were the backbone of this township. We couldn't agree with her more. Macomb Township is fortunate to have well-balanced and seasoned department heads. Most are experts in their fields and highly respected in their profession. On Thursday, April 18th, 2 of our members resigned, citing the culture that exists within Township Hall. We have another employee who directly reports to Mr. Assorti, who has filed a grievance for a hostile work environment. We would like to thank Trustee Bussanow, Trustee Smith, and Clerk Posey for reaching out to our membership to verify Mr. Maher's claims. To the other 4 board members, we hope you find time in your schedule to meet with employees and do your due diligence so you may understand the difficulties that these employees are currently facing. Our membership has decided to make this easy for you. Here is a signed letter from our management employees stating that we agree with the contents of Mr. Maher's letter, and we once again urge you to separate the positions of HR Director and Legal Counsel. These 2 roles should provide checks and balances. The combining of these positions continues to present conflicts, interests, and now benefits the employees. May I approach?
Your time is way up.
Okay, may I approach the board and pass these letters out?
Yes.
Why don't you just hand them here and we'll pass it down?
I need to give the supervisor a copy.
Oh,
Thank you, sir.
they're not the same? Just trying to help you, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Ted Nicodemus, address on file with the clerk's office. I find it kind of puzzling that some of you sitting up there tonight have puzzled looks on your face, making it like this is the first time that you've ever heard residents being intimidated or employees being intimidated, etc. 2 years ago, residents came and spoke about the reasons why HR and legal should not be combined. Now, 2 years later, we had 2 employees put in the resignation letter. One employee who the residents fought hard for, we wanted to have a purchasing specialist, and that position didn't last longer than a year. Employees may not feel comfortable going to the individual that has the combined position of HR and legal. Hopefully we will not have more employees leaving and a potential lawsuit for wrongful termination or harassment. It's hard to believe that the HR and legal has not had a review in 2 years.
Anyone else? Very well, we will head on then to new business. First item is from the engineering department, and this is a request to schedule a public hearing for Stillwater Crossing Estates site condominiums phase 2 street lighting. Mr. Van Tifflin?
We're proposing a public hearing date of June 12th.
Thank you. Is there a motion to set the public hearing for June 12th?
Madam Chair, I'll go ahead and make that motion for June the 12th.
Motion by Mr. Krasinski.
Support.
Who supported?
Buzzino.
Mr. Buzzino, supported by Mr. Buzzino, to set the public hearing for June 12th. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. That motion carries. The next is a pathway abeyance for 21195 25 Mile Road. Mr. Van Tifflin again.
Yes, Madam Chairperson, members of the board. This piece of property is actually into the assessing department for a property split, as is the township's policy. When parcels are split or combined, we would have them put the pathway in so that we don't leave a gap in the system in the future as properties are developed. We've reviewed this particular piece of property. There are no other pathways in the area. It's in the area of 25 Mile and Foss, and we're recommending approval. There have been others that the board has granted. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Van Tifflin?
Madam Chair, on the recommendation of Mr. Van Tifflin, I'll move on this item. Make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Krasinski.
Support.
Supported by Ms. Smith to approve the pathway abeyance. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. That motion carries. Next, we have authorization for Anderson Eckstein Westrick to provide design, engineering, and surveying services for the future phases of Wolverine Country Club Estates. Mr. Van Tiffelen.
Yes, ma'am. Chairperson, members of the board. The developer of what's left of the Wolverine Golf Course at 25 Mile and Romeo Plank is requesting to use Anderson, Eckstein, and Westrick to do all of the detailed engineering and surveying to get the future phases of that project going. The AEW has previously done some of the topographic survey information, some preliminary layouts for the previous developer. The new developer has then taken it over, and instead of having them start from scratch, they want to be able to use AEW to take it from this point and finish it up. We've reviewed this. We do have another engineering firm who's capable of doing these reviews, so there's no conflict of interest. So we're recommending approval. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
Madam Chair, hearing none, I'll make a motion to authorize A, E, and W to provide design, engineering, and survey services.
Motion by Mr. Krasinski.
Support.
Supported by Ms. Goodhue to grant this request. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. That motion carries. Next, we are being asked to authorize the sanitary sewer trunk line design along 22 Mile and Fairchild Road. Mr. Van Tiffelen.
Yes, ma'am. Chairperson, members of the board. We have a couple of developments that are proposed on either side of Fairchild south of 22 Mile. Currently, this area is not serviced by sanitary sewer. Previously, the Township Board had approved a diversion in that area that would allow sewer to come along 22 Mile over to Fairchild and then south along Fairchild to serve these developments. Developer now wants to proceed with the design of that sewer. It has been the Township's policy for quite some time that a consultant working for the Township designs it instead of having the design engineer for the site do it, because there's some complications with larger diameter, deeper sanitary sewer in public right-of-way along the major roads. So in the first step in the process is to get the board to authorize this. We would have an estimate prepared. Once that estimate is in hand, the developer would be responsible for depositing all the funds that are necessary for the work to be done. The township would pay our consultant to do the work, and then when the plans are ready, all permitted and ready to go, it would be turned over to the developer. They would build it at their own cost. So this won't cost the township any funds. We just need authorization for them to use one of our consultants to do the work.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions?
Madam Chair, hearing no discussion, I'll move to make a motion to request for authorization to proceed with the sanitary sewer trunk line design along 22 Mile and Fairchild.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Krasinski, seconded by Ms. Posey to approve this request. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. That motion carries. Next, we have Human Resources Department, and this is to initiate the recruitment process for a deputy assessor. Mr. Sordi.
Madam Chair and members of the board, at the last meeting, this board approved the amended position description for the position of deputy assessor. Since that time, the assessor has contacted me and asked me to move forward to asking the board to initiate the recruitment process for a deputy assessor. That position is covered under the collective bargaining agreement with AFSCME Local 1917 and would be posted in accordance with the provisions of that collective bargaining agreement. So with that, I'd ask that the board authorize Human Resources to initiate the recruitment process for deputy assessor.
Thank you. Any questions?
Madam Chair, I'll make the motion that we authorize Human Resources to initiate the recruitment process.
Support.
Motion by Ms. Goodhue,
Support.
supported by Mr. Krasinski, to authorize Human Resources to initiate the recruitment process for deputy assessor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. Motion carries. Next is the add-on 11A, and that is to authorize the supervisor to execute authorization to release confidential data on behalf of the township.
Madam Chair and members of the board, in connection with the township's implementation of Ben Express, which is what the Human Resources Department provided to move forward with open enrollment on a computer-based system. The township's dental insurer, Delta Dental, has requested the township execute the authorization for release confidential data. This is so that when the employees request or sign up for Delta Dental in the process of the open enrollment process, their information is immediately transferred forward to Delta Dental. In that, it gives Ben Express access to those records. Everyone, of course, has to meet all the appropriate guidelines and rules for disclosure of protected health information. So with that, I'd ask authorization for the supervisor to execute the authorization release confidential data on behalf of the township.
Any questions?
Madam Chair, hearing none, I'll make a motion to go ahead and execute the authorization to release the documentation.
Support. Motion by Mr. Krasinski,
Support.
supported by Ms. Nevers, to authorize the supervisor to release this confidential data. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. That motion carries. Next, we have the add-on 11B, and this is a request to extend offer of employment to a building inspector. Mr. Sorty.
Madam Chair and members of the board, back in February, the board authorized the Human Resources Department to recruit for a building inspector. We've been working with Mr. Maples to move this along to make sure his department is fully staffed. Our department received 17 applications for the position. Initial interviews were conducted on April 15th and 16th. Final interviews of 5 candidates were conducted with the selection committee on April 25th. And with that, the selection committee of Janet Dunn, Karen Goodhue, Christy Posey, Joseph Maples, and Mike Badamo are recommending the following candidate for hire, Adam Byrnes. So with that, approve Adam Byrnes for hire contingent upon successful completion of post-offer pre-hire physical exam, drug and alcohol screening, background check, and psychological examination.
Thank you. Any questions?
Madam Chair, hearing no, I will make a motion to go ahead and hire Adam Barnes.
Motion by Mr. Krasinski,
Support.
supported by Ms. Goodhue, to extend the offer of employment to Adam Byers contingent on successful completion of post-offer requirements. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. That motion carries. Under the trustees section, we have a discussion and vote to set June 26th as the meeting that the board will vote on a proposed ethics ordinance. Mr. Busno, you put this on the agenda?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. It has been to date 17 months since we started discussing an ethics ordinance. It's been 13, almost 14 months since we put a committee together and you heard it spoken about tonight, of a committee that's worked well together. They were appointed by each and every board member, and everybody in that committee is in support of an ethics ordinance. If we set June 26, 2019 as a date, that will be 19 months since we started talking about this, and 16 months since we put that committee together. I have been asked to vote on a major thing, sometimes right before a board meeting. Information is presented in front of me. I think 19 months is long enough for us to do our due diligence. And the ethics ordinance that we have been presented is based on an ethics ordinance that's been used successfully at the county. I want to remind this board that is the only thing to date that has officially found our former Public Works Commissioner guilty of anything. It's an ethics ordinance that works. And maybe it's not perfect, but we can vote on it, and we can always amend the ordinance. We do it all the time, okay? We've been able to do that, so let's pass it. I want that date, to be honest, personally, to see who really has the will to pass an ethics ordinance. Today's May 8th, again, this is another 6 weeks that we have to shuffle through the paperwork, look at the ordinance, make the corrections, and again, if we pass one on that date, we can always amend it if it's not perfect. This is why I want to present this date as a date that we vote on it.
Any questions?
Madam Chair, if I may. Mr. Busno, at the last meeting, when we discussed it, that one of the concerns was that we needed a process to attached with the ordinance in order to enforce it. Mr. Resorti had indicated that he was capable of doing that. I think we need to get that in time so that we can do our vote on the 26th and not have it delayed due to not having any processes attached. So I don't know if we need to make it in form of an additional motion to your date that you want to do the ethics ordinance, but I would like to request that I see some type of process put together that we can review by legal, who has had input on what we need to do to enforce what we can and cannot do, and then tweak it from there. But I don't think if we don't have a date that we receive the processes, we're going to hit another deadline of June 26th where we have no processes, we have nothing that gives us the ability to enforce. So if you would include in your motion a date that the board would receive processes to that ethics ordinance to enforce, I think it would be helpful.
How about 2 weeks before then?
That's fine with me.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, if I may, am I understanding that you're asking for clarification on the civil infraction type thing? And I think that needs to be spelled out, and because there are federal laws, state laws, and then civil infractions, the last being the least, with the least amount of clout.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think that needs to be explained in detail, that if we just look at civil infractions, we may be diminishing the importance of something that might be serious. It took me a while to wrap my head around what all that meant. I've had several meetings with Karen and Mr. Resorti, and I now feel I understand it a little better.
Okay.
I have no opposition to an actual ordinance, but we have to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, it's taken a lot of time to get there, and but doing it right is the important thing. So should...
Are you asking for clarification on what I said?
No.
Okay.
No. What I'm saying is perhaps each of us should put together a document and, make sure we have each board member receiving a copy of that so that they can clarify, just exactly what we have here and what we need to do right, and so that we may vote on the 26th. But I don't think we're quite ready to vote without expanded clarification and definition. And I would like to also have a discussion with Mr. Gilios on that. And so I would like to tell you that I'll be contacting you.
That's fine.
Okay? Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anyone else?
I was just gonna say that we have been working on it. I asked Mr. Resorti to sit down with me and go over it, and then Mrs. Nevers volunteered to, she wanted to sit in as well. So we are working on fine-tuning it.
Yes, we are.
And understanding it.
Anyone else?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to set the June 26, 2019 as the meeting that the board will vote on a proposed ethics ordinance. I make a motion to do that.
Motion by Ms. Posey,
Support.
seconded by Mr. Busnos to set the June 26th meeting for the ethics ordinance. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. That motion carries.
Also, Madam Chair, I'd like to make the motion that we receive a procedural or process for enforcement and clarification on enforcement to the ethics ordinance within 2 weeks. Did you give a
By
date?
June 12th.
By June 12th, from legal counsel.
Pardon me? Say that again?
I make a motion to receive the process or procedures that will accompany the ethics ordinance by June 12th from legal counsel for review.
Can I just,
Certainly.
as it's currently written?
Any input you have
I got it. I understand.
that we gives us time to
Understand.
address prior to the 26th.
Got it.
Okay.
And that's another almost 5 weeks from today to try to put that together. So,
Thank you. That's the motion I was making.
Motion by Ms. Posey,
Support.
supported by Ms. Nevers, to set June 12th as the deadline for input from board members. Okay?
But to receive process and procedures from legal counsel, but yes.
To digest the procedures in relationship to the ordinance. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. That motion carries. Number 14 has been moved to closed session,
13 and 14.
and 13 has been moved to closed session. So we will then go on to number 15, and that is a request to authorize the supervisor to execute a purchase agreement with Six Rivers Land Conservancy. Mr. Sorty.
Madam Chair, this is, the board's been addressing this on several different levels for some time now. So in connection with the purchase of the property at 26 Mile Road, the township's been working on a grant to obtain that cost. So the township expressed its interest in purchasing the property for park purposes, and property appraisals were obtained as required by the grant applications. Six Rivers, in the meantime, has approached the township to assist with the purchasing of property to allow the township time to try to obtain the grant money to be available for the purchase. The township, as I indicated, has applied for the grant funding from the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund. If the township is successful in obtaining the grant, then the grant would provide 75% of the cost. Six Rivers has agreed to purchase the property from the current owner and later to sell the property to the township. But in order to do that, they need a written agreement from us. That's what's attached with your packet. That purchase price is capped at $1,215,000, and the closing of the sale of property will take place on or before December 31st, 2020. So with that, I'd ask for authorization for the supervisor to execute the attached purchase agreement with Six Rivers Land Conservancy.
Thank you. Any questions?
Madam Chair, if there's no discussion, I would make a motion to authorize supervisor to execute the attached proposed purchase agreement with Six Rivers Land Conservatory on behalf of the township.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Krasinski,
Support.
supported by Ms. Goodhue, to authorize the supervisor to execute the purchase agreement. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. That motion carries. We will move on to public comments, and this is on non-agenda items. If you wish to speak, please come to the podium, state your name. Remember, there's a 3-minute time limit.
Jim Jellius, I'm still on file. This is for consideration when you're in closed session on item 13.
This is for non-agenda items.
Right.
That's
Back
it.
in 2016, 74 people had applied for the HR director position, with some having 10 years experience and master degrees in HR. Yet the job was given to an attorney with no experience or formal training in HR. But even taking the specific personalities out of all this for a moment, how can anyone reasonably expect one person to do 2 separate jobs effectively? The board should consider hiring an honest-to-goodness HR director, one with the proper education, training, and experience for that position. That would truly be in the best interest of this township and may have prevented the problems that we have recently seen in the employee resignations. It's interesting to note that we did not have these problems when I worked here, and we had a competent, dedicated HR director and his competent staff that worked with him. I certainly don't recall people resigning in volume due to harassment, threats, or intimidation, etc.
Mr. Jellios, this was an agenda item.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This section of public comments
Well, I'm done with that part anyway.
is for non-agenda items.
Okay. Kudos to Ms. Posey and Mr. Bussinow for their factual assessments of the problems that have occurred in the past.
Mr. Jellios.
Okay, you're not gonna let me speak, is that right? I'll put it on social media.
Anyone else? Non-agenda items.
Again, I'm Dennis Martin from ASME. I would like to address comments made last meeting by Trustee Nancy Nevers. The union feels it was inappropriate for you to read publicly text message you received from Patrick Maher. Additionally, you later stated you did not believe Mr. Maher wrote his resignation letter, even after Mr. Maher stated that he wrote it and stood behind the contents of the letter. You said that you believed the union was behind the writing of the letter. This is a false statement. It is unfortunate that Mr. Maher, a respected member of the management staff, suddenly had you and other board members questioning his intentions. Mr. Maher, in his own words, was trying to make you aware of the culture that still exists at Township Hall. The tone and tenor of what he believed would be a personal text message and a formal letter to the board are naturally different. Mr. Maher writes for a living, and he is fully capable of expressing his thoughts and opinion on his own. At a board meeting not long ago, you took exception with a member of the audience claiming you didn't write it your own letter and that someone did it for you. It seems somewhat ironic that now that you are making the same accusations of Mr. Maher. You stated that you believe the union leaked the letters to the paper. This is another false statement. We would have hoped your focus would have been on the contents of the letter, not how it got to the papers. In your comments last meeting, you stated how impressed you were with Mr. Assorti's negotiating skills. You said he could teach master's class in the subject. The union would like to know the basis of this judgment, since you have indicated to our membership that you'd never been involved in negotiations previously. How can you make judgment on Mr. Assorti's skills as a negotiator if this was your only experience? You also stated that Mr. Assorti negotiated terms that were fair both to the township and the union. In fact, neither side got anything close to accomplishing their goals. The only thing that was really accomplished was hard feelings. A truly skilled negotiator would have been able to navigate their way to a mutually beneficial agreement in the end, and it was only the union negotiating team attempting to find common ground. Finally, the most importantly, you stated that it was your and the negotiating team's hope to provide more money for the better insurance of Mr. Maher, Mr. Van Tiffelen, and Mr. Hickey. You told Mr. Maher that he should call Mr. Assorti regarding this. You indicated that Mr. Assorti had told you numerous times how valuable those staff members were. We would agree with you on their values. One fact you failed to acknowledge is they are members of a union, and as a member of the township negotiating team, you are required to negotiate for the whole union, not just 3 members. The public comments you made last meeting seem clearly indicate that you really only cared about 3 or 4 people in management. We request that you retract your statements regarding our union. Hopefully you will now finally do your due diligence and look into the situation Mr. Maher tried to bring to your attention. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ryan Gearman. I am the president of the Macomb Township Professional Firefighters Union, Local 5023. My address is on file as well. I just wanted to touch on a few items that were brought up at the last board meeting. And in particular, I want to speak about Mr. Maher's resignation letter to the board. Mr. Maher has been a great resource for the township, as I think you all know. And I definitely want to thank him for all of his help over the years. But I could not agree more with one of the points he made in his letter, where he states that there is a conquer and control atmosphere rather than a congenial relationship in the township. I say that I couldn't agree more because that's exactly how a majority of the employees would feel and describe the general atmosphere here. Anyone even remotely familiar with the history of the relations between the employees and the township government as a whole would have to agree with that assertion. At the last meeting, Mrs. Nevers, you stated, "I believe a person skilled in legalese crafted the majority of Mr. Maher's resignation letter and had him sign it." Well, I've worked with Mr. Maher on many occasions. I've shared verbal and written communication with him, and I can tell you he's more than intelligent enough to craft his own letter without enlisting the help of someone in the legal background. You then stated that the animus and vitriol in that resignation tells me one thing. Mr. Maher did not write it. She accused him of conspiring with some mystery man or mystery men of attempting to discredit Mr. Assorti. Well, Mr. Mahers told you that he crafted the letter himself and that he owns it. His words. I did not see any animus or vitriol in that letter. What I saw in that letter was the same opinion that the majority of the employees of this township, both rank and file and management, who work in this township have. That opinion is that the combination of a human resources director and the township's general counsel only serves to reinforce that conquer and control environment here. Let me make it abundantly clear, I am not personally attacking Mr. Assorti. I don't think that anyone, no matter if it's Mr. Assorti or John Doe from wherever, could effectively serve in both roles. In fact, I've only heard two people say that it was a good idea to combine those roles, and both of them happen to be attorneys. Mrs. Nevers, you didn't listen to the multitude of employees that have taken issue with this combination of these two positions, and you didn't listen when Mr. Maher wrote you that letter. Instead, you take a shot at his credibility, and like you've historically done, take another shot at the union people, your words, of this township. I've seen some improvement in regard to our working environment here, but let me be frank when I say that statements like that serve to destroy any progress and are what create this adversarial relationship in the township. The unions in this township are not some mystical, shady institution operating in a dark underground bunker somewhere. The unions of this township are simply made up of employees who work here. I hope that some of the newer faces on this board will consider these statements, past and present, and help create change, because none of the issues I spoke about serve to help advance this township in any form. Just so there's no confusion, these are my own words. Nobody wrote these for me. Thanks.
Wow.
Ma'am, the children have been waiting back there, if you wouldn't mind.
Emily and Michael Broadbridge, 45619 Thorntree Lane. Hello, my name is Emily Broadbridge.
And I am her brother, Michael Broadbridge.
We are both students in the Chippewa Valley School District.
I am in 3rd grade at Cherokee Elementary.
And I am in 8th grade at Wyandotte Middle School.
Well, I'm sure you know why we're here.
It is that time of year again. National Lemonade Day is coming up soon. We would like to invite you and our community to our big day. This year will be our 9th time participating in National Lemonade Day.
Our lemonade stand will be Saturday, June 1st at our house, 45619 Thorntree Lane, from 1 to 4 p.m. Just like the past few years, we will donate all the money raised to the Homeless Education Project.
With the money we raise, we help provide transportation, clothing, and school supplies to kids our age in need to help them fit in at school and have a great learning experience. Our goal is to always help as many children as we can with the money we raise.
Last year was such a success.
We would like to thank Miss Dunn, Miss Goodhue, Mr. Busnow, the Parks and Rec Department, the Macomb Township Fire Department, and our community for their help. We were able to help so many kids with the $10,935.85 that we raised together with your help. Without your support, we would not have been able to raise over $33,000 in the past 8 years. We are so very grateful.
To make this year just as amazing, we really need your help.
If you could all spread the word about our lemonade stand and the opportunity that we have to help others, we will be able to put smiles on many children's faces. If we all work towards the same goal, we can make a huge difference in the world.
We can change lives for the better. We really hope you can make it on June 1st for a cold glass of lemonade and some great company.
Let's together try to give every kid the same learning opportunity that Michael and I have.
We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. And could Michael and I hand out invitations? Thank you. On the invitations.
Thank you, Michael. Good job.
Great job, you guys. Kenna?
Jesus.
Thank you, honey. Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much.
That's a hard act to follow, right? But we are happy that Emily and Michael are Chippewa Valley students. We're proud of them, and hopefully they exemplify many of the students that attend Chippewa Valley schools. But I just wanted to make, I'm not attacking anyone. I haven't been here in a while, and I'm making some observations about what I see. I'm not saying you're going to care, but I just want to give my opinion. So, and this is not an attack on you, Mr. Assorti. It's more of the protocol and process of how this operates. So as most department heads, when they address the board, they sit at that table and address the board on a business matter, correct? So Mr. Assorti is sitting with the rest of the board, he's giving his recommendation, and then he is asked for legal advice on these. It's really not a good, A, it looks bad, B, it's a conflict of interest. And I feel that, Ms. Posey, this is not an attack on you, but when I heard you say, which I don't blame you, that for the Ethics Committee voting on this 26th of June, that you would appreciate the process that's going to be followed. I assume that's kind of, I'm paraphrasing, I don't know if that's correct. And it's sort of like the administrative regs that go along with the policy, correct? Mm-hmm. And you said, which I agree with you, that Mr. Assorti, I mean, I don't know why he would write it, and then you suggested we get a legal opinion. So does that mean he's going to write the regulations, and then he's going to give the legal opinion on that? And you guys, you think that's okay?
This has been...
I'm sorry, that is just so wrong. I would just, as a citizen and a taxpayer, I would just suggest that perhaps you have an outside attorney review those and bite the bullet on the cost. I don't think that there's other lawyers that could probably review that for you in an objective way. That's my only comment. Thank you for your time. And by the way, I live at 16940 Francisca Court, Macomb, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Anyone else? Non-agenda items.
Good evening, Tom Sokol. My address is on file with the clerk's office. I just wanted to carry on with the theme around process. And one of the things that I've identified that I wanted to ask the Board of Trustees help on is I don't want to get vendor specific at all in these comments, but one of the things I've observed, and maybe there's nothing there, it's been a common practice in some municipalities with some vendors to be the low bidder on a project and then have change orders. And I'm not saying that's an issue here, I'm not saying that's a problem here, but I've seen change orders, I've seen large change orders being approved. And I just wanted to ask the board for some extra sensitivity, maybe some extra rigor, maybe asking some additional detailed questions when these are coming across your desk for approval, in order to avoid any potential issues. Because I know that's a way that some vendors are able to potentially be the low bidder and then get the margin over time. So I just wanted to ask for your sensitivity for that, some extra focus on that as you're approving some of these changes. The other thing I wanted to share, I did some benchmarking in Shelby Township. And, you know, you've seen some residents come up here today. I've seen some residents over the last couple of years ask Mrs. Dunn for help or ask questions. Sometimes pointed, not pointed. Sometimes sincere, sometimes not so sincere. I kind of noticed if it's someone that's not a regular, she's more inclined to respond. And again, around the theme of moving forward, restoring trust and faith in local government, one of the things I noticed from Supervisor Stathakis is that he answers questions. And I'm not saying you got to do what someone else does. It's your ship to steer, obviously. But I think it's a best practice when residents come up here with sincere questions about operations to talk to department heads and then have follow-up at the next meeting. I've seen him follow up on questions that maybe even seem borderline ridiculous to me. And I think it's a best practice, that type of follow-up, to show empathy, concern for the residents, because we know there's a lot of people that are coming up here to speak and taking time away from their families because they care, or they see things that maybe they don't understand, or things that they're very passionate about. So I'd like to see that same follow-through on a lot of the important issues that we brought up today, because I really truly believe that's a best practice. So thank you for your time.
Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Kathy Western. There was an article done by C&G Newspapers that just got published online today, and it was further coverage of the last meeting. And it specifically mentioned during trustee comments that Nancy Nevers said that hearing at that meeting was the first time she was aware of a manner with Maher, and said the formal resignation was the first time she became aware of any problem Mr. Maher was having with Mr. Assorti. Further, that she did not understand why he did not share those problems with me. Mm-hmm. I think when any of you say that there's a lack of awareness of any problems of this sort with the employees, it exactly illustrates the point Mr. Maher was making in that blockbuster resignation letter when he said there is a disconnect between the department heads and the board. There's a disconnect. That's the reason that you don't know. And Ms. Nevers, in terms of wishing that the employees would talk to you more, I would just like to suggest that a way to get an employee to talk with you in a more confidential manner is not to read aloud a text exchange between the two of you at a public meeting on videotape.
I'll address that.
You also made a comment about are tough union negotiations now considered bullying? And I can't speak to that, and I don't believe anybody called union negotiations bullying, but when this senior citizen lady reported to you, to this board, that she had been bullied by Mr. Assorti, did any of you look further into that? Did any of you question that? Did any of you follow up with me? I only told you about the one incident. There were two others, both either in this building or on township grounds, that if you'd ever care to follow up with me, I would be happy to share with you. And that was bullying. When another resident filed a report with the Macomb County Sheriff's Department about feeling threatened by Mr. Assorti after a meeting in this parking lot, and another trustee filed a witness statement along with it, verifying his belief that a threat had been made. Did you question him? Did you open an investigation of this employee? Never have I ever experienced treatment by any township employee or any board member as I have had from this man. I hope you will consider that in the future. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening, Madam Supervisor, members of the Board of Trustees. Frank Cusmano, 16188 Jenny Drive. I came a little late today, but I understand that the board went into closed session under MCL 15.268A. I want to remind the board that it's not a requirement to go into closed session under any of the exemptions. It is discretionary. So I wasn't here who voted to go into closed session or not, but I just want to remind the board of that. It said the public body may meet in closed session for the following purposes. And subparagraph A says to consider periodic personnel evaluation. Now, as a taxpayer, I want this board to raise its game as to the Open Meetings Act. I believe that there's been violations and continue to be violations of the Open Meetings Act, and that this board is not even aware that it's happening, and it's exposing the township to attorney's fees and costs as a result should a citizen who's been a victim or a maltreated under the Open Meetings Act decide to sue. I would suggest that the board consults a competent legal counsel in the Open Meetings Act, or, and I've suggested this to at least one other board member, that any question you have in your mind, you should request the opinion of general counsel. This way you may be able to protect yourself against personal liability under the Open Meetings Act. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'm going to call on Mr. Van Tifflin for a minute. When we have bids on major projects, Jim, and a change order is issued on that same project, is there not a clause in the contract usually that is contingencies that are built in for just that purpose?
For our municipal water and sewer sidewalk programs, we don't build contingencies in, but there are provisions for extras, change orders. There's a process that must be followed. All the change orders that come before the township board that we're involved in, they do come before the township board. It's public information. Also in those change orders is an written explanation as to what items were changed and why they were changed. So, I think we're trying to be as transparent as we can. Construction is not perfect. When you dig into the ground, you never know what you're going to run into. So, most projects do come with change orders. It's not because somebody missed something. It's because things come up during construction that you need to change.
Thank you. If there are no other public comments, we will go on to trustees' comments.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I guess I need to address a few issues that were brought up this evening. I have nothing prepared, but I've made some notes here. And first of all, I want to say that I stand by my letter and what I said in the letter. Those were my opinions. I have no proof, but I drew on the fact that I have known Patrick for quite a while. He is a gentleman. He is a mild-mannered man. He doesn't say anything that is in any way volatile normally. And so, not that he isn't capable of writing an articulate letter, because clearly he is, but I felt that his persona was one that would not manifest itself in such vitriol, okay? That's my opinion. Again, I have no proof of that. And the reason I read the texts were not to, just be, bellicose or whatever. It was to say this was the discussion that I had with him prior to, at first when I heard that he was going to resign, I was shocked, immediately got on the phone with him, and I asked to speak with him. He chose to go by text, which was fine. Therefore, I begged him to, if there's something we could do to keep him, because I valued the work that he's done in the township, okay? I asked him please to come Monday morning and see Mr. Assorti. Now, from the text itself, he indicated, at least I thought he indicated he would do that. Next picture show, I see this horrific letter, and I'm thinking, did we not talk and converse back and forth, and did this not seem to come to some kind of resolution? I must be wrong because clearly that didn't happen. But again, I have met with people. I'm not a gossipy person that's going to go, psst, 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 what's going on here? Well, tell me what's going on over here. To me, that isn't professional. But I have put myself on notice, and people, anybody in the township on notice. I will speak to anybody. I will meet at any time with anybody. Mr. Gearman, you know I've met with you. Mr. Czar, I've met with you. Mr. Sokol, I've met with you. Who else have I met with? Mr. Gilios, yes. And every time I've met with somebody, and Miss Posey as well, anytime I've ever met with anybody, I believe it was cordial. I believe it was professional. And so, again, I'm not at the township every day, but, you know, people, I believe that people feel that sometimes they deserve a job, and then when they don't get it, they are, I don't want to say in a snit, but they start licking their wounds, and then it affects their attitude and whatnot. And I think that happened here in the township with people that didn't get a job that they wanted. Now, over and above that, again, I'm a little wordy here, but I don't have a prepared text that I'm working from. But I would like to clarify what happened from the jump in negotiations, okay? Karen, Tim, Mr. Assorti, and I were on the management side of the team, and we had Sal DeCaro, Chuck Pierce, Mr. Gillis, and Jim Van Tifflin on the union side. And opening, as again, I'd say from the jump, we got a paragraph about that long that demanded a double-digit % increase in their pay, demanded it, and I'm telling you, the negotiations went on and on and on for weeks and so forth because they were adamant about that. And then we brought in a mediator, and then after that, they came, and we had the board, we had to bring the board up to date. They were shocked. Every single one here was shocked. Okay, next picture show, we bring in a mediator, and then there was a little more reasonable presentation from the union, and they wanted a 3, 3, and 3. Now, at that time, the jump from a double-digit % increase to a 3, 3, and 3, we figured we'd be able to work on that. But the board was apparently aggravated for that. Nobody wanted the 3, 3, and 3. Okay, so we had to take it back to the board. We couldn't just say, okay, it's a done deal. We take it back to the board, and they say, go to fact-finding. Okay, now, that was my first experience with negotiations, but I believed that I'm a fair person, and my point was this could have been moved along a lot more quickly had the presentation initially come back with something, or had been presented with something reasonable, okay? Let me see if I needed to say anything else. Oh, and Ms. Weston, you're upset because I read the text, but the context of the text was my way of saying this isn't a Patrick Maher, okay, in my humble opinion. Again, I wasn't prepared to say anything tonight, but I needed to set the record straight. So with that, I'll zip it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to thank everybody who talked tonight. You proved what separates our community from some others around us. You presented your points, you were very polite, you were very professional, tackling some hard topics, and I want to address a couple of them. But first of all, the most important people I have to address is who I call the Lemonade Kids. I know your names, okay? Last year, I did get a chance to sponsor you, as some others up here did. I was not able to go. Baseball coaching often gets in the way. And by the way, my high school baseball team's doing very good right now. But I have a request of you this year. I'm sure I'm going to sponsor you again. Look for that check very soon. I'm on a new diet that's been very successful. Can you please give me a cup of sugar-free lemonade? All right? I'm asking you for that. And I do want to address some things. Denise, thank you for your service on the Chippewa Valley School Board. Okay, I don't know if you kind of alluded to it. You're still there. You do great things for our community. And I'm sure you are more than happy to allow these children to go in front of you because you serve them every day. So thank you. One of the things that you did ask about, though, and I can't address everybody because, I mean, I guess I could, but I'm going to try to keep this as short as I can. You talked about responding to public comments. I never know personally when I can talk and when I can't. I have tried to address residents before in public comments, and I've been gavelled. So I think it's getting better, to be honest. I think last few months we're getting a little bit better at addressing residents, and you just heard it here tonight. But there's been nights where I've tried to respond, got gavelled, say I can't, and someone else was allowed to talk. So your guess is as good as mine when us up on this board can respond to residents. But again, thank you for serving. And it is National Teacher Appreciation Week, and I consider you an educator too. So Kathy Western, you had brought up a question about, excuse me, about exactly how this review is going to go. I don't have any idea. We're going in a closed session, so I'm sure we can't talk about much, but I can tell you what's on the record that's foilable in an email. I did request goals and objectives. I was told, and this is foilable, okay, that none existed. So I said, we have to turn to the contract for the review. So that's about all I can tell you right now, okay? We have, the contract becomes our review point. So that's the best I can tell you with that. And sometimes I know residents say the board collectively, but in my defense, you know that I've called for this review a couple times. A couple times I've piggybacked on you asking for it, and we've done it at the same meeting. So I've called for this review. This is the third time I've called for it, but this time I did it officially. Frank, as far as MCL you brought up, I believe the employee under MCL 26A, the employee has the right to request that a performance review be performed in closed session. If I'm not correct, I'm sorry, I went along with this. You know, that's one of these things these dual roles brings up, because I'm not exactly sure who I'd turn to for legal advice on this particular moment. Maybe I put you on retainer, I don't know, and you can answer that for me. So doing my best up here. The last thing that I want to address is to all the union members up there. Thank you for what you do for this township. Thank you for coming to work every day, okay? I know all of you don't agree with all my politics, and you know what I'm talking about, but I'm a union member. I'm a dues-paying union member. Thank you for everything you do. I just want to make sure that there's no doubt that there's people up here working to make sure that we appreciate you and that we appreciate unions, okay? Every day, okay? I am a dues-paying union member. Thank you for what you do.
Anyone else? Very well. We will then move on to Treasurer's Comments.
Yes. I know this is probably going to be construed as supporting somebody, but it's just my feelings. It's the truth. Mr. Maher came and talked to me on Thursday before the letter went to the paper, and he told me 2 times that he was not leaving because of Mr. Assorti. He did give me his opinion that he thought there should not be the dual roles, and I took that to heart. But 2 times he told me he was not leaving this township because of Mr. Assorti. It was for a better opportunity and for insurance reasons. Also, that's why, Mr. Nicodemus, I had a puzzled look on my face, I guess. Ms. Western, the review, we do not know how to do the review because we have never evaluated or reviewed anybody, at least while I've been on this board. So this is something new to us, but we are following his contract. Thank you.
Clerks Comments.
I'll start off with the Election Day facts from May 7th. Despite voters in Macomb Township rejecting the proposed bond proposal for the New Haven schools, 555 voted yes and 389 voted no. The proposal passed district-wide by a 10-vote margin. So it just goes to show you how important it is to vote. Even when you think it's okay if I don't vote, everyone else is going to vote, this vote passed only by 10 votes. 786 out of a possible 946 voters voted by absentee ballot. 160 residents voted in one of our 3 polling locations. This was the first election allowing absent voting by all voters without citing a statutory reason. And also the first election where unregistered residents could walk into the clerk's office on election day, register to vote, then vote with an absent ballot. While we only had one person take advantage of registering and voting on election day, we are anticipating this to occur more often during the presidential election cycle. Lastly, we are hoping that more of our voters take advantage of the no reason absent voting. This means that any registered voter can now vote by mail without citing a reason. This change will be a great help to those who have to juggle their schedule to get to the polls or who work most of the day and find it hard to get to the polls. Now voters are being given the option to either do this by mail or just come into the clerk's office before the election and get their ballot. If this is something you're interested in, we encourage you to get on our mailing list. Just send us an email, call, or come in, and we will give you all the details you need to get on the no reason mail voting. I just want to say thank you to all the election inspectors, grounds and facilities, and my staff that assisted with administering this election. No matter how big or how small the election, no matter how big or small the election, your support and hard work is very much needed and appreciated by our office. I did type up a text because I'm extremely frustrated and emotional with the events that have taken place in the last few weeks in the township. So in order to keep my emotions in check, I made sure I wrote it down. I feel compelled to respond to recent events and comments made this evening. In the recent resignation of our planning director, he wrote, "There is a distinct disconnect between the department heads, the board members, and HR legal counsel. This is an observation that I believe has an unfortunate degree of accuracy and is one we must attend to. This disconnect was fully illustrated by the correspondence sent to us from our HR legal counsel dated April 24th, within which he repeatedly expressed his shock, his lack of knowledge, and lack of agreement. Further, he subtly maligns the author of the letter, defends himself for several paragraphs, and uses his closing paragraph to reassure the board that he has already heard from candidates for this attractive position, as if that is all we need to be concerned with. What has been ignored is a call to provide a platform that might help build mutual respect between the board and supervisory staff, a call for open and honest communication, the warning we risk losing more good staff, a challenge to us to listen to concerns of staff, insist on evidentiary documentation, and assess the veracity of their concerns, a plea for the board to legitimately and honestly reevaluate the combined position of HR, legal counsel. As was stated in the resignation letter of our planning director, human resources is supposed to be the conscience of this organization. The HR director is supposed to be helping us by repairing what has been damaged and heading off any further deterioration. Instead, I continue to witness the behavior of conquer the employee. It is our responsibility to at least look into the statements made with regards to the job performance and demeanor in the workplace that has been brought to our attention by 22 of our employees. It's no longer just me, and it's no longer just a few people in his department, it's no longer just a few people in my department. We have a response now from 21 additional employees. When an employee states they would rather take a 5-minute yelling phone call from a previous trustee over what they are dealing with today, we have a big problem here. That's all I have to say.
On a lighter note, thanks to everyone who attended the groundbreaking for the new North Branch Public Library. The broadcast media department filmed the event, and it is on the cable channel. Thanks to them, and thanks to the library for setting up the event. It was very well attended. The next thing I have is Ordinance number 242, which is in regards to irrigation. This was adopted by the board on May 13th, 2009. I will read part of it to you. Automatic lawn and or landscaping irrigation is prohibited between the hours of 5 a.m. and 11 p.m. except as provided in section A5, which states the following. A property with a newly seeded or sodded lawn may for the first 21 days following planting irrigate as often as required, except that irrigation is prohibited between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. B, a water user manually can irrigate residential landscaping utilizing garden hoses and sprinklers, provided the irrigation is not connected to an automatic system, is attended and monitored by the water user, and is prohibited between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. This goes into effect May 15th. Thank you. That's all I have for this evening. There are 3 items to be discussed in closed session. We need a motion to adjourn to closed session.
Madam Chair, I'll go ahead and make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Krasinski.
Support.
Supported by Mr. Busno to enter into closed session. Ms. Posey, would you call the roll?
Trustee Krasinski?
Yes.
Trustee Busno?
Yes.
Trustee Nevers?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Treasurer Goodhue?
Yes.
Clerk Posey, no. Supervisor Dunn?
Yes. We are adjourned to closed session. Turn from closed session. There were 3 items discussed. The first was the discussion of the written legal opinion regarding township rights relative to employment application and investigation. Are there any motions?
Yes, Madam Supervisor, a motion to accept the recommendation of legal counsel.
Is there a second?
Support.
Motion by Ms. Posey, seconded by Mr. Krasinski. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. That motion carries. The next item discussed was, let me find it. Request to authorize general counsel to execute Hummel Acres consent judgment. Are there any motions on this item?
Yes, Madam Supervisor. Motion to authorize legal counsel to sign consent judgment with modifications recommended by engineer.
Support.
Motion by Ms. Posey, seconded by Mr. Krasinski, to authorize general counsel to execute the consent judgment as discussed. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. That motion carries. And the last one was, I can't find it. 13, right?
Yep.
Correct.
Request for annual employee performance and compensation review pursuant to Section 5 of the employment agreement between the Township of Macomb and Thomas Authority. Are there any motions?
Yes, Madam Supervisor. Motion to execute the performance review of Human Resources Director / legal counsel as discussed.
Support.
Motion by Ms. Posey, seconded by Mr. Krasinski. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. That motion carries. That concludes the business for this evening. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion
Support.
by Ms. Posey, seconded by Mr. Krasinski to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. That motion carries, and we are adjourned.